I tried to retreat under his overwhelming aura. The massive shadow of the black wolf loomed over me, locking me in place with an undeniable authority. I felt entirely trapped, my strength fading under his intense gaze. There was no escape. The giant creature held absolute dominance, and I was just a defenseless being standing before him, waiting for his final word. "I want you to shift," he ordered, carefully word by word. "I can't, my wolf," Sparkle replied in temporary defeat. I tried to retreat under his overwhelming aura. The giant black wolf loomed over me with absolute dominance. I felt entirely trapped, my strength fading under his intense gaze. There was no escape. The giant creature held an undeniable authority, and I was just a defenseless being standing before him, waiting for his final decision. I closed my eyes and calmed myself down. As a start, I released a shaky breath and started shifting back to my human self. I arched my back as all the bent-up bones cracked into straight ones. It was painful. The tiny claws of my wolf hid behind, and my human limbs appeared. The beastie-looking nails got replaced with small trimmed nails. The fur disappeared and left my pale skin visible to him. The wolf above me moved away as soon as I shifted to my human form. I shyly covered myself, watching the dark wolf, who then started sniffing around as if looking for something. He walked away from me while my eyes started looking around for an escape. A few seconds later, the wolf came back with some clothes, carrying them with his teeth. "Blue is asking whether those are our clothes or not," Sparkle said in my mind. "Oh, they are. Who is Blue, by the way?" I asked back in my mind. "It is the wolf." "Oh, what happened?" "Gray is so mad you didn't shift when he told you first, and probably waiting for you to talk." "Who is Gray again?" "The human." I hummed at Sparkle, eagerly watching the large wolf standing a few meters away from me. The wolf tossed the clothes at me, which were between his teeth. They were the clothes that I left before shifting into my wolf form. I quickly hugged the clothes and waited for the wolf to look elsewhere so I could change back. He turned in the opposite direction, facing away from me when he got my silent request. I quickly slipped myself into my clothes. Afterwards, with quiet and quick steps, I walked behind the large tree that was next to me. I saw how the black wolf patiently waited for me to change and tell him, but I didn't. I couldn't. All I wanted was to hide from him so badly. I badly wanted to turn around and run away. He looked ferocious. I gripped the slippery tree side, looking eagerly at the foreign wolf. From his look, I knew he wasn't someone from my pack, but he was from another pack. Or a rouge, I assumed. It brought me into my thoughts. How did he cross the borders? Why aren't my pack members chasing him away or killing him? 'Cause my pack members were ruthless to that point. They used to kill whoever passed the borders, small or big. The wolf turned around after a while, and our eyes met for a second. He quickly looked down, focusing on something else. As I continued watching him, I saw his fur turning back to human skin. He was shifting to his human form just like I did. I watched him breathing heavily as his bones cracked and bent in specific directions. It was one painful process for werewolves to shift back and forth. The process breaks all their bones when they shift. I was a werewolf, after all. Being another werewolf, I knew how painful the process was, and the shifting was so painful, especially when I was a weak Omega. I couldn't take my eyes away, his dominating structure. The piercing gaze kept me rooted to where I was. I felt tiny all of a sudden. He shook his head with a slight smirk appearing on the corner of his lips when he caught me staring at him. He bent down to pick up his clothes. I didn't know what was wrong with me. The only thing I knew was I couldn't take my eyes away from him. My heart was crazily beating inside its cage. My mind was running 1,000 miles per second. "Done staring?" he asked, which made me release a silent gasp. I bit my lower lip and looked down with a flustered face, still hiding behind the tree. "What is your name?" he asked. "Everlay," I thought, but I couldn't reply. "Why don't you have a scent?" he asked again, waiting for my reply. I quickly looked up at his face and slowly moved my shoulders to a slight shrug. He frowned and walked to me, keeping long strides. When he was right in front of me, I took a few steps back, looking for an escape. But I knew I couldn't escape an alpha, which I assumed he was of his build. "I asked you a question," he said with his voice slightly rising. I looked at him with wide eyes and shook my head twice. I didn't want to make him mad. He clicked his tongue and looked down at me again. I silently gasped at the way he looked at me. He seemed so mad because I didn't answer. It was the nature of all alphas. They were impatient. "Don't just stand. Do something," scolded me inside. I nodded my head and took a deep breath. Then I raised my hands to take his attention. His eyes shifted to my hands. I pointed at myself. He tilted his head, looking at me sharply. Then, using both my hands, I crossed them in front of me, shaking my head simultaneously. Then I pointed at my lips with my right hand, moved the same hand from left to right, indicating a conversation between two people. He didn't move for a while, but watched me with a raised eyebrow. "What a stupid person," I thought in my mind, thinking maybe he didn't understand what I did with my hands. Sparkle laughed in my mind. "Don't call him stupid. He is an alpha." "Yeah, you sure?" "Uh-huh." I started panicking at the new information. I only looked at his build and assumed before, but honestly, I couldn't say if he was an alpha or beta or whoever because I was born without a scent, without the ability to identify others' scents, though I was an omega. I started sweating as fear crept through me. He was an alpha. "Calm down, okay? He won't do anything," Sparkled confirmed, making me feel relieved. "I don't want to talk," the tall person in front of me asked. "Is that what you mean?" He sounded mad again, so I quickly shook my head, scared. Then I pointed at my throat, shaking my head so he would get the point that I could not generate my voice much. But yeah, I could whine and whimper. But I couldn't talk. "You can't talk." As in, I showed him a thumbs up with a bright smile. Finally, he understood what I said. He looked at me, taken aback by my reaction, so I quickly wore the same sullen face from before. For a mere second, I forgot that he was another egoist alpha. "Go back to where you came from," he ordered. I pointed in the direction I came from. Then I pressed my fingertips, making a peak-like thing using both my hands. I wanted to say, my home was that way. "Oh, I came from that direction too," he said, and raised his eyebrows in a silent request to follow him. I meekly nodded, following him with at least a 10-meter gap between us. I knew the cruel reality of our world. The higher-ranking wolves often viewed us, the Omegas, as mere subordinates, destined to carry the heaviest burdens. We were expected to follow orders blindly, surviving day by day under their absolute control, and fading into the background whenever they pleased. So I reminded myself to be cautious, despite the fact he was the first alpha who ever even tried to have a decent conversation with me. He was a bit more patient than all the other alphas I've met. But how different can this alpha be?
Chapter 1 has come to a close. Please stay with us as we read through the rest of this story. If you are watching, please give us a like and leave a comment telling us where you are tuning in from. Now, let's continue listening.
Have you ever heard of living corpses? I've heard, but I never knew what those were or who they were. And my caregiver used to call me a living corpse, while saying how I was turning into an actual living corpse each day. Saying I was scared at that moment was an understatement. First of all, I didn't know where I came from, nor did I know where my caregiver brought me to. The only thing I knew was I couldn't talk. So I tightly hugged my bunny plushie on my chest to feel a bit safe within the unfamiliar surroundings. Alpha Jackson, this is Everlay, the girl I told you about yesterday, my caregiver said to an old man who looked around in his early 40s. I looked at him with a questioning gaze. Who was he? They asked me to stay where I was and moved aside to talk about who knows what. I perked my ears and tried to listen. Because you are an old friend of mine, I have to say, that Omega girl won't be safe here, Alpha Jackson said, as I silently gasped. I know. Then why are you leaving her here? He asked. She is mute, and I have better things to do than take care of a mere mute, my caregiver started saying. I looked down at my feet, not knowing how to express what I was feeling inside. It was as if the only person who took care of me turned their back on me. I never knew she disliked me. Sad much? A voice asked me from behind. It was a boy around my age, maybe a few years older than me. He had a basketball hug to his side. When I looked at him, he was staring back at me with a smirk. I slowly nodded at his question. You are an Omega, aren't you? He asked. I nodded again. You can be my favorite then, he said again, with his smirk growing wider. So I nodded. 10 years later, I stared at my reflection in the mirror to realize I looked like an actual living corpse. It was evident in the mirror. My hair was damped in sweat due to the hours I worked outside in the yard. The fact I was a girl or an Omega didn't matter at all. I looked away from my reflection and stared at the girl next to me. She was no different from my state. One thing was, she had fewer scars on her hands than I had. But I wasn't in a place to compare anyone's pain with mine. I looked at the other ones in the large room, who mainly were drifting off to sleep or staring into oblivion. It was our favorite thing to do. I took a deep breath and started walking out of the room. I opened the door and closed it behind me as I made my way through the dark corridor of the basement. I walked past many glum Omegas who had the same expression as me. But I had that one ray of hope inside me for my 18th birthday, which was only a few days away. For some unknown reason, I was so excited to turn 18. Actually, it wasn't for an unknown reason, it was for a known reason. I was looking forward to turning 18 because I wanted to find my mate. So I skipped up the stairs to the kitchen in my mildly happy mood, where I found a few senior Omegas washing dishes. I offered them a sweet smile, which they returned back to me. Good you are here, love. Can you give us a hand with the dishes? One with blonde hair asked. I quickly nodded and walked over to help her with the dishes. I wore a pair of rubber gloves and took the drying duty since no one was there to do it. I took a napkin and wiped every dish they washed and handed over. While helping them with the dishes, I listened to their conversation, but was unable to add my ideas since I was mute. "I heard you. Everlay doesn't have a scent, do you?" she pointed out. It was really funny that she knew my name, but I didn't know her name. I nodded at her words. "You are quite lucky, aren't you?" the tallest one among the girls asked. I tilted my head in confusion. I used to call it unlucky. It would only complicate the process for me of finding my mate. Now, don't you scare the kid. I am sure she is not even 18 right now." The blonde hair said, "I am not scaring her, but she should know when she is living in this pack. Worse could happen after an Omega turns 18. The tallest one bluntly spoke as she wiped the plates next to me. I froze as I slowly kept the dried dishes on top of the counter. I didn't let the senior Omegas know that their words scared me, but they did scare me so much. And they were right. I did know my pack wasn't the safest place for an Omega, but I never knew it was that much unsafe. "See, you scared her," the blonde hair screeched. "No, I was just warning her. She should know about these as well. Shouldn't we warn about the ones who—" "Shut up." I slowly walked out of the kitchen as they argued on that topic. I shouldn't have been happy about my birthday, and the last ray of happiness faded away from my heart. Blue Crystal Pack was the pack where I lived in, but it wasn't the place I wanted to call home, because it didn't feel like home. At first, I had no idea where I came from. I didn't know the woman who gave birth to me, nor the man who was next to her when she gave birth to me. Since I could remember, my caregiver looked after a few other Omega kids and me. No one knew where we came from. Some Omegas had their parents killed during pack wars. But for me, I always heard the same. "Your parents left you here one morning." So I stopped asking them who my parents were and moved on. First of all, I thought maybe my parents didn't love me enough, 'cause that thought sounded cruel. I concluded that. My parents were dead. What else could I think of? Going back to the topic of my pack, it was the best place for alphas and betas, but it was the world's worst place for Omegas. I grew up seeing things I shouldn't see. It was awful, so awful. It was insane. On the one hand, I was really lucky. I was born without a scent, without the ability to identify scents, though I was an Omega. I tiredly sat on the ground next to the large garbage bins. Once in a while, sitting somewhere alone brought me back to reality, sometimes crying out aloud if the surroundings felt secure, or staring into oblivion, wishing to get sucked out of this world. I looked at the tiny box in my hands. It was the handmade cake the cook gave me when I woke up. A silent tear escaped flowing down slowly. I sadly stared at the cake box for a good minute. I could remember when each Omega in the large room used to bring the tiny box to share with everyone on their birthdays. Even I used to run downstairs to the basement room and show them the cake as if I won gold. We got something we loved once a year like that, and we could get whatever flavor of cake we wanted. I even had chocolate chips dipped in mine. But that didn't seem to make me happy, not even a bit. My mind was wandering off far. It was my 18th birthday. "Did you see Mute?" I heard a familiar voice asking from the backyard. My lips parted to a small gasp. It was Ren, the person who was named the next alpha of our pack, and the same person who gave me the nickname Mute, because I was mute. I didn't know how to talk. Even if I moved my lips and put pressure on my throat, I couldn't generate any words, but sometimes whines and whimpers were possible. I squeezed shut my eyes, wishing I was invisible. I didn't want to see him. I made myself silent, wishing he would leave. Keeping the tiny cake box aside, I hugged my knees to my chest, listening to their conversation. I saw her coming out with some garbage. A voice that I couldn't recognize said. I rolled my eyes and cursed in my head. If only I could run fast like a flash, or be invisible right there. I quickly wiped the tears on my cheeks and my puffy eyes. Taking a deep breath, I waited for the alpha to come to see me. Not soon after I regained my composition. The devil itself came to me with a smirk. I didn't know you couldn't hear as well, he said, though he sounded like he was teasing me. I knew he was fuming in anger deep inside for ignoring his calling before. I shrugged helplessly, not knowing how to react. He rolled his eyes and walked right in front of me, and I just looked down at his heavy boots, wishing he wasn't there. While I was still seated on the floor, I let out a silent scream as I quickly got onto my legs so it would be less painful. He let go of me as soon as he saw my painful expression. One thing I knew about him was that he was cruel, but he could never have that emotion for long. His expression turned to a dull one, and then he scoffed. How embarrassing. I can remember your birthday, he said. I looked at him emotionless, though inside I was freaking out. I knew that he was trying to come to a point, so I faintly nodded, finding no way out of the situation. Why don't you come to my room tonight? His request didn't sound like a request, but it sounded more like an order. My eyes widened when the realization hit me. Alpha Ren was rhetorically asking me to accompany him for the night. I shook my head. I felt scared. Do as I say. You don't want me to kick you out of this pack now, do you? He asked again, to which I shook my head furiously. Good. This is one thing I like about you, he said. I bit my tongue, forcing the tears which gathered in my eyes to stay there without moving. But I wish you had your voice. Just like that, he left me there, and the tears which dwelled in my eyes dropped as soon as his figure faded. I didn't like the way he invited me, and neither did I want to be used, as they say. Walking around the pack house always felt like walking in a labyrinth with so many traps. You never know when, where, or who is going to attack you, which way, especially in a pack like in which I lived. I slowly made my way to the ground floor, deliberately taking my time. My bare legs touched the cold tiles, giving me a line of shiver with each step I kept. It was around 10 p.m., the usual time I finished my work every day. I had no idea why I had to go upstairs to the room where Alpha Ren was. I came to a halt looking around at the hallways, and it was empty. No one was there. I recalled the time Alpha Ren told me to come that night. He didn't sound threatening, it sounded more like an order. I took a step back, breathing heavily. Shall I go back? I asked Sparkle in my mind. I have no idea, but I feel like it is okay to leave. No one's around. No one will know you disobeyed him, right? He ranted. Without replying, I took another step back. Yeah. I hope it will be okay. What time is it again? A familiar voice asked from behind. I silently gasped and turned to face the devil Alpha Ren. I made out his dark silhouette under the dim lights, but I couldn't see his expression, if he was mad at me or not. I slowly shrugged, expecting him to let go of the question. What time? He asked again, walking towards me. I cringed and took a glance at the old grandfather clock next to us. Then I quickly showed him 10 fingers. Right. Why are you so late? He asked again. I moved my hands to the floor and showed him around the hallways, telling him that I was working till then. He sighed. When I ask you to come, you have to come one way or another, he said, his voice lacing impatience. I nodded. Then he started walking up the stairs in which he signaled me to follow him. I started following him behind, and I fiddled with my fingers, nervously. It was the first floor, where I had rarely been. I watched with wide eyes as we walked past the large room of the Pax Alpha and Luna ahead of us. I saw the door to his room. I remembered when Alpha Ren told everyone that no one could come into his room without reason, and no one knew what lay in there. Maybe a monster just like him. He opened the doors and signaled me again to come inside. I hesitantly looked around. Did I suspect maybe it was a prank? Yes, I did. I stood outside his room, rooted to the floor. But I quickly stepped in when I saw his impatient expression. But before I could step inside, I felt some pain around my lower abdomen. Ignoring the pain, I meekly watched around his room because pain was usual for me. I didn't know if I should call it my fortunate or unfortunate to be in his room. He was a dangerous person, after all. The room was large, nearly as large as where 8 of the Omegas of my age stayed, with 8 beds. The large room we stayed in was crumpled and packed, but Alpha Ren's room was much spacious. "Do you like it?" Ren asked when he caught me looking around his room in awe, and I didn't nod or shake my head. His room was different from the whole pack house. Pack house had all the vintage-looking furniture and designs, and it sometimes even looked rusty, but his room looked modern. He had many new things we weren't allowed to touch, and I've only seen some of those things in magazines and newspapers. The home theater system was what caught my attention the most. It had a large television, about a 50-inch one which was slightly curved, and it lay between a set of prominent speakers. The other thing that caught my eye was a large projector attached to the ceiling. I wondered how big it could project. "You can look around if you want to," Alpha Ren said again, when I didn't respond to the question he asked before. I nodded, actually forgetting why I was even in his room. My eyes caught some DVDs on his table, and I slowly ghosted my fingers on one of the DVDs, reading the titles. Most of them were horror and thriller. Next to that pile was a PS5 game, which I assumed was some zombie apocalypse game. It wasn't a surprise. I found all those things amusing. I had a liking for the horror and thriller genre. Because I was preoccupied with Ren's other games, I didn't hear the door opening and closing. Only when I heard unfamiliar voices did I turn around. It wasn't only us, Ren and I, in the room, but there were 2 more guys inside. I was left puzzled when they shared a few words and looked at me at the same time. Feeling uncomfortable under their gazes, I slowly kept the DVDs I was examining on the table. "Don't you have a Cent Omega?" one of the guys asked. My question was, why was he asking me that question? It wasn't any of his business. Moreover, I assumed those were friends of Alpha Ren. And also, why were they in our pack house when it was curfew time? But anyway, I nodded, as if accepting what he asked. "An Omega without a cent," the other guy sneered. Exchange a cold glance with Ren. Before I could process their hostility, they stepped in to surround me, treating me like an uninvited intruder in their high-ranking territory. They demanded my immediate removal, leaving me trembling in absolute isolation on my own birthday. I always thought it was fortunate that I was mute. People used to look down at me and call me names, but I didn't mind the slightest. Being mute was an excuse for me, and it always was. If I wanted to escape a conversation, it was helpful. Also, it was better to be silent in the pack I was in. But I never knew I would have to face a situation where I wanted help. I was screaming, but no sound except little whines came from my throat. Alpha Ren stepped forward, cutting off my exit and forcing me to look at him. His cold eyes narrowed as he expected my absolute compliance. Unprovoked, he cornered me, ensuring I had nowhere to run as the weight of the situation brought tears to my eyes. I woke up, panting heavily. The first thing that came into my mind was that all a dream? I was on a soft surface, which I assumed was my bed. I heard a few whispers, so I moved slightly and looked around me. Everyone was gathered around me, as if I was an exhibit in a museum. "She is awake," the girl next to my bed said. I rolled my eyes, thinking why on earth she sounded surprised. "You were unconscious for 2 days," she said again. Yeah. Wait, what? I gave her a confused look with the support of my elbows. I slowly hoisted myself to the sitting position. "We heard you were being treated in the doctor's place, so we rushed here. What is more?" "Alpha Ren was bruised on the face too," she exclaimed. I furrowed my eyebrows while listening to her. "He said someone attacked when you two were talking or something." I tried to get all the puzzle pieces together and make the whole scene. Then it came to my mind. That night. Wherefore, I raised my hand and slapped it across his face. My hand hit his cheek with a painful impact which made my hand sting in pain. I silently gasped when I saw a red hand mark on Alpha Ren's face. "Oh, great," I heard one of the guys mutter from my side. Alpha Ren turned to me with full fury. His eyes were shining in anger, with his jaws clenching from the pain, and his hands curled into fists. I slapped one of my hands on my lips when the realization hit me. I hit our future Alpha. I shook my head furiously, trying to take the punch back if I could. I wanted to say a million sorry, but I couldn't talk. I slowly reached out. As soon as my fingertips touched his bruised cheek, he slapped my hand away. In the chaos, I stumbled backward and collapsed onto the cold floor. A sudden, sharp darkness washed over my mind, and my vision began to blur rapidly. I could feel a stinging pain throbbing from the back of my head, accompanied by a faint, warm sensation. The room fell completely silent before the world spun into total blackness. The last thing I saw was his wide, startled eyes, reflecting sheer panic. I pursed my lips when I remembered everything that had happened that night. Without my conscience, I was breathing heavily at the memories. "What happened?" the girl next to my bed asked. I shook my head, but just as my head moved to shake, it started paining. I felt the numb feeling all over again, as if someone was pouring acid into my head. "Doctor?" Another guy called the doctor as they saw me losing consciousness again. For the next few minutes, it was all medication. The pack doctor, whose name I learnt was Lilac, made me rest my head on a pillow. She instructed me not to move my head that hard and some other stuff. But my mind was wandering off to that night of the incident. I was scared. I felt disgusted. It was terrifying. But on the one hand, I was happy I defended myself. On the other hand, I knew it wasn't going to be good. I went against our future Alpha, and the consequences. I didn't even want to think about them. All the crowd should leave now. Lilac clapped her hands and asked everyone to leave. Everyone left, excluding the girl next to my bed. She looked at me with a worried gaze, so I quickly tapped her hand. "Yes?" she asked. I showed her a pen and a piece of paper using my hands, and it was hard to show those. But luckily she understood. She disappeared out of the room as I patiently waited for her to come back. When she came to me with a crumpled piece of paper and a pen, I quickly took them and jotted down some words. "What is your name? I call you the girl next to my bed in my mind," I wrote and showed it to her. She stifled a laugh as she read the words. "So sad I knew your name, but you didn't know mine," she asked. I shrugged. "I am Fa," she said. Our little conversation got cut off when someone knocked on the open door. Fa turned around, and I moved my eyes careful enough not to move my head. I caught a glimpse of a familiar jacket. "Alpha, Ren, you get out. I want to talk with the injured one." His voice came out loud. I tried to reach out and pull Fa to my side, but she scattered out of the room even before I could touch her. It wasn't only Ren who came inside. There came the beta of our pack, MJ, from behind. I gulped and watched as both of them shared a glance. I looked down at my fingers at the sight of the deep bruise on Alpha Ren's cheek. It was me who gave that to him. MJ sighed. "It is just a short order. Keep your mouth shut about that night. No one would be on your side, even if you tried to complain about the incident. Are we clear?" With a heavy heart, I nodded. His words, the way he threatened me, made me cringe back without a fight. But how unfair it was. But I couldn't do anything about it. MJ patted Alpha Ren's back and left, smiling. I watched as the prominent figure left, leaving only the two of us in the room. "I am not sorry for what happened to you," he said. His eyes weren't focusing on anything. They were running wild. I secretly scowled at his words. "He is not even sorry for trying to rape you with his friends," Sparkle said in my mind. I almost flinched at the word rape. Sparkle never beat around the bush. If she had something in her mind, she told it without any hesitation. "Remember when I told you that you could be my subordinate to command?" he asked, raising his eyebrows. I nodded, but looked away, not wanting Satan himself to talk with me. "But I don't think so." I lost interest. His dangerous smirk made its way to his lips. "And you don't even know what I do with things I don't like. What I do to things that embarrassed me in front of my friends." He pursed his lips. "I wish you didn't do that." And he left. I didn't understand a word he said. One thing I knew was I wasn't a lucky girl. I sniffed over the pot of soup I was making. The warm air invaded my nostrils, giving me a hint about what flavors I'd added before. "Oh my, it smells great," I heard Fa's voice as she made her way to me. I looked up at her as she was taller than me. She had her hair pulled back to a ponytail just like I had. We looked almost the same, but she looked more tired and worn out than I did. I smiled at her and nodded. It was that one time of the day when alphas and betas were out on the field with their training. That was the only time we had a smile on our faces, because no one was there to judge or hurt us. But it only lasted a maximum of 3 hours because the female betas come early from practice. "I wanted to tell you." Fa started again. I turned to her while my hand was still stirring the soup. "You might need a haircut," she said with a teasing laugh. I rolled my eyes at her point. "But what I wanted to ask you was, do you know sign language?" she asked. I turned to her and gave her the "are you for real" look, because there was no way I had the chance to learn sign language education. We were only taught how to read and write, nothing more. "Fine. I want to talk with you like my mother couldn't speak either. So my father taught us all sign language. I was hoping you knew," she said with another smile. I didn't reply but smiled at her. It made me happy that she wished to talk with me. In summary, she was the only one who spoke with me. "Oh, what do we have here?" We heard a very familiar voice from the doorways. Fa turned to the door and folded her arms on her chest, probably giving the beta girls a challenging look. Because I knew there was no use in doing that, I focused on the soup. "Who told you can take a rest?" It was Jeanette. I could point her out as the mean girl among the pack members. She was nosy as a start. "No one told us, Jane. Plus, we are making dinner, so why not have a conversation? You should get your nose out of here." Fa spat out. I poked at her side to calm her down, but even I couldn't help but laugh a little. Then I switched off the gas and stirred the soup a bit more to see if the thickness was enough. "I see," Jeanette mumbled and left the kitchen. Fa and I shared a glance at the incident. "Stupid freaks. I am going downstairs." She patted my back and left the kitchen, leaving me alone with my soup. I sighed, not even the slightest bothered by Mira's words. I was used to her nagging and troublemakery words anyways. But Fa had some temper. She never tolerated their words. No wonder she got all the assaults from them later. I removed the rubber gloves I wore before and started collecting the dirty dishes to wash them. I ordered the glasses from the morning and carefully laid them in the sink as I turned on the faucet, letting the water fill them. "I told you they have a high ego. It would help if you kick them out of the pack as soon as you become the alpha. You don't know how they talk to me." I heard Jeanette's voice down the hallway, probably bad-mouthing someone about me. I kept a watchful eye on the doorway while my hands slowly started scrubbing the dishes. "I see," I heard Alpha Wren's voice after her. My hands involuntarily stopped scrubbing when I heard his voice. It didn't take long for both of them to come through the door. I fixated my eyes on the dirty dishes, finding them rather fascinating. I heard a deep sigh that belonged to Wren. "I asked you to behave yourself, didn't I? I am capable of kicking you out of this pack." Alpha Wren repeated the same thing he used to tell me ever since the incident that night. I turned to him and gave him a dull look. It wasn't like I did anything. I wasn't at fault. Even if I was, he shouldn't take Jane's side. Everyone knew how fake she was. Look at her troublemakery face. I am sure she poisoned that soup. Jeanette started adding hay to the fire. I stifled a laugh at her childish words, but put on my dull expression as Alpha Wren's eyes moved to mine. "Get out of the kitchen and leave the pack house. Every doors will be locked for you tonight." "I don't want to deal with people like you," Alpha Wren said with his voice colder than cold. I gave him the "Are you serious?" look, to which he responded to me with eye contact, realizing he was severe. I removed the apron tied around me and started putting on my shoes to leave the kitchen. But not soon after, Jane charged at me with a scowl on her face. I released a silent shriek as she kept on pushing me of my hair. From the corner of my eyes, I saw Alpha Wren coming behind her. Then he pulled her away from me before any chaos happened. Respecting the alpha, Jeanette did release me, but not soon. She pushed me so hard before moving back with a deadly glare. I got pushed back harshly, losing my balance, and my side hit the counter hard. The hard impact toppled over the pot of soup on the counter. If I had my voice, if my throat could generate any sounds, it would have been one hell of a horrifying scream. The burning hot liquid soaked me from head to heel, burning my skin in all possible ways. It was hot. It was terrifyingly hot. I thought I would melt away right there. Alpha Wren's figure came in front of me. He quickly grabbed me into his arms. I tried to wriggle out of his grip, but I was already in the air. He threw me over his shoulders and carried me outside. I could see many pack members looking at us in wonder. shocked to see their alpha carrying an omega girl. The burning feeling was spreading around my skin. It started feeling as if it was acid. It only took a few minutes with the alpha carrying me and running at full speed. The next thing I knew, he threw me into the backyard fish pond. I got startled, but his hands quickly dipped my head inside to cool my body down. It was one hell of a mess with fish swimming around me. We were both wet from head to heels. Did any fish die? We even had an audience. "Are you okay? Is it burning?" Alpha Ren asked. What I didn't miss was the tiny concern lacing in his voice. But I was seeing red at that moment. It was all his fault Jeanette launched at me that way. Since I can remember, I've seen that girl going after Ren like a puppy waiting for special attention from him. What I knew was that she would do anything to get her hands on Ren's pants. From afar, I saw her looking at us with fury. I badly wanted to go to her and pull all her hair and make her bled, then slice her into pieces like meat. But I knew I couldn't do that. I didn't have the strength nor dare to do so. But what I did next surprised me. I stood in the pond glaring daggers at her. I clenched my hands into fists and punched the nearest person, who turned out to be Alpha Ren. Everyone gasped. By the evening, I got slap after slap from Luna. The doors closed during the night, leaving me outside alone in danger. The visitors arrived. I decided to look for a place to sleep for the night. Maybe the woods won't be that dangerous after all. "It is an honor to have you here, Alpha Gray," the old man, whose name was. Jackson shook hands with me with a delightful smile playing on his lips. I rolled my eyes in my mind, seeing how his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Such a twat," Blue, my wolf, said in my mind. "It is an honor to visit your pack too, Jackson," I said back without addressing him as Alpha. It wasn't as if he would go against me even if I disrespected him straight away. There was only one reason I wasn't bothered giving the needed respect for him. The guy was an ass licker. My pack, the Dark Moon Pack, was the largest, the strongest among all packs. Even though the territory was more prominent, we even had a few Rouge packs friendly with us, which made no one go against us and have a war. My pack was strong in every way was an advantage for me. But on the one hand, I always had to have that bold look on my face, a non-caring attitude, and I didn't have a private life. The third fact came because of a consequence. I didn't have a mate. No, I couldn't find my mate. 7 years have passed since I turned 18. I've been looking for them for 5 long years. Finally, I gave up on the thought that my mate was dead. "Come inside," he said, furrowing his eyebrows. As I made my way inside, I got welcomed by an enormous hall with dead silence. I could see his pack members standing around without talking a single word. My pack members followed me from behind, talking like there was no tomorrow. One difference I found between the two packs was that my pack was always lively. I've given them the freedom to be loud, to have fun, but at the same time do their duties correctly and get training for 5 hours a day minimum. No slacking off. It was my first time in the Blue Crystal Pack because my father, who visited the pack before. "This is your first time here, right? You should meet my son. He will be the alpha soon, right after he meets his mate." Jackson's wife, the Luna of the pack, exclaimed. I could almost see her hidden smirk. It was the law. The new alpha must have their mate during the crowning ceremony. I was the first alpha to get crowned without having a mate. Everyone knew that I couldn't find my mate. I smiled, hiding the fury which was growing inside me. That is indeed very fortunate. I would love to meet him. Being the leader of the pack was insane. I had to hide my emotions and lay back in silence for the sake of others. If it weren't for my pack members, I would have yelled at her and made a scene. The way I had to represent the pack of 600 members gave me so many responsibilities that I forgot about my personal life. Let's have dinner right away. I am sure you all are starving and tired because of the whole journey. We've prepared a simple meal for you, Alpha Jackson said, motioning us to follow him. I could hear my beta Kevin groaning next to me. Even though I had that mood, I masked it off with a fake smile. I could even feel Kevin being uncomfortable next to me. If it weren't for when my father and Jackson had been friends since they were small, we wouldn't have visited the Blue Crystal Pack. We walked into a dining room where a large dining table was. An 8-chaired one. Made me wonder where other pack members sat when having their meals. We had a large hall with tables and chairs for over 300 people in my pack. It wasn't like all the pack members would sit at once to eat, leaving their duties. I could feel the surroundings tense as we took seats. In my opinion, Alpha Jackson was trying to please me so much. So, how is my friend doing? He asked about my father with a genuine smile which didn't suit him. He is resting these days. The past few days we held a few ceremonies for Omegas, I said, adding, he is such a busybody. I didn't even have any work at the end of the day. I ended with a chuckle. Alpha Jackson made a strange face in which he quickly put on a smile, nodding. So, as you may know, this is my Luna. My son will arrive in a few minutes. I think he went out to the woods, he said, then pointed at a middle-aged man who was staring at me eagerly. This is my beta, Mangje. Like that, he introduced me to a few people, all alphas and betas. I impatiently nodded, mentally rolling my eyes. It took us almost 3 hours to have dinner and leave the dining room. I wasn't tired. I was devastated for pretending to be interested. It wasn't a visit I wanted to come to, but my father instructed me to get to know Alpha Jackson to strengthen a friendship between the two packs. It took another hour to show us around the pack, and finally, when they showed me the guest room, I quickly mind-linked Kevin. Can't we shorten the visit? I asked him. No, Alpha. The full moon is only coming 2 weeks from now. We must have that for the oath and agreement between the two packs, he said in detail. I know that, but I've no idea why we came this soon. It was Alpha Jackson who sent an invitation to visit them 2 weeks before the full moon's day. And it is not like you can go against your father's words, huh? I cut the mind link after he said those words. It was insane. Though I got my title as the Alpha of the Dark Moon Pack, I didn't have all the power. According to traditions, it was a must to have a mate to the Alpha who would be the next leader of any pack. Fuck the traditions. My mate was dead, and it wasn't like I would fall for a random mateless person. Only a few were born without a mate or with a dead mate. I knew I didn't want the comfort of another person, aka a mate. I didn't want anyone. All I wanted was full authority over my pack, to control over the 600 members freely without any restrictions working on me. And it angered me even to think how Alpha Jackson's wife, the Luna of the pack, nearly made fun of me. I woke up just as the first sunray hit the earth. The night's sleep was tiring because it wasn't my usual bed. The weather was quite dry by the time I woke up. Tiny sweat beads were gathered on my powerful presence, upper half, which made me cringe at the sight early in the morning. I detached myself from the bed and stretched out my limbs with a hoarse groan. Looking at my sweaty self, I decided to shower. so I got off the bed with my feet touching the icy cold tiles. Shuddering at the feeling, I looked out of the window to catch a glimpse of the dark woods. It was dimly light outside, and the woods looked so perfectly dark. It was as if some kind of a spell worked on the woods, making them look much creepier. Looking at my sweaty self, and then again at the dark woods, I decided it would be better to go for a stroll before taking a wash. I took out a simple hoodie and slid myself into it as I looked down from the window. They've given me a first-floor room, making the height from there to the ground lesser. I jumped to the ground and dusted myself as I walked into the woods in one swift move. The woods started from the side of the pack house, which allowed anyone to go in freely. I watched as the image of the pack house behind me shrunk as I made myself deep in. My bare legs squelched in with every step because of the mud on the ground. I didn't find it disgusting, I found it rather natural to have the dirt wrapping around my skin. Though the weather seemed dry, it was so refreshing among the trees. I saw the morning sunlight creeping through the leaves as I went further, making it brighter than when I first saw the woods. I removed my sweater and looked for a place to tuck them in. I put it down in a dry spot when I found a large tree. After I stripped down powerful presence, I started shifting to my wolf form. My slightly tan skin turned into a dark color. Soon, it was impossible to see my skin. My long fingers disappeared as large claws started forming. Beastie nails replaced human nails. My ears shrunk, and two pointy ears poked from the top, also covered with fur. Every bone in my body broke and bent to form the structure of a wolf's skeleton, which was far different from a human skeleton structure. Soon after, I was standing on 4 legs instead of 2. Finally, Blue, my wolf, groaned. I internally rolled my eyes at his words. It had been a long since I shifted the last time, especially to have a free stroll in the woods. I silently watched as Blue made his way down the path with slow but long strides. We watched as the creepiness in the woods grew with the giant trees hovering over us. Though the sun was up and was lighting the whole area, the trees perfectly blocked the light, allowing only a few light spots to appear on the ground. Every direction we turned looked precisely the same. Any human being would get lost there. But with our werewolf senses, it wasn't a problem for us. As the wind blew through the trees, the leaves moved, making sounds like music in my ears. I found the woods rather fascinating, and wet than the woods in my territory. The cold wind hit our skin, making Blue shake his body and letting the wind blow through our fur. It felt amazing. Go for a run, I told Blue in my mind. Was thinking the same, he replied with his paws, digging into the wet ground. Soon after, he made a giant leap into the air. The first stride made our paws dig into the ground with a significant impact. After aggressively working out with our stamina, Blue started running at swift and slow paces while enjoying the surroundings. One time he would run after a faraway flying bird, at one time just running for his life. Blue always went out of control whenever he gained freedom, but I knew just how to put him under control. We were immensely enjoying the surroundings when Blue came to a sudden halt. What is it? I asked. As I tried to listen and feel, I felt Blue's ears perking and moving to concentrate. Some breathing and footsteps, he simply replied. We walked cautiously to the right and headed towards the unknown threat. I too felt some presence around us with my instincts, but we couldn't catch any scent. Blue came to a stop, looking earnestly at a large tree. We were still like a statue waiting for the upcoming threat. and it was coming closer and closer. Emerging from behind the large tree was a small pup. We watched as the small one hopped and ran after something. Blue squinted his eyes, with our vision getting better. Once we looked closely, we saw the small one trying to catch a butterfly. Just a pup, Blue mumbled inside, but we kept on watching. Our eyes ran around the little pup's body while examining the body features. It had a small body with winter white fur, but around the neck and back, purple fur was highlighted within the white coat. It had its 2 ears raised straight and its tail wagging as it yapped after the butterfly. Strange, I muttered. What is? Blue asked. That thing doesn't have a scent, I pointed out. Blue was silent for a while as he kept a few steps toward the pup. Blue and I shared the same thought. That pup wasn't anyone from the blue crystal pack as we tried to scent it. What was more alarming was how it didn't have a scent. It is not a rouge either, Blue growled, saying. One thing we thought about together might be a witch. Witches could take a wolf's form, but they couldn't have a scent or a pack. They could trick us from their physique, but no one could pass my conscience. Blue dug his paws into the wet earth with a silent growl. Then, with a mighty leap, he leapt in the air, landing right in front of the pup, who was chasing after a butterfly. The butterfly fled away as the little pup slowly whimpered, trying to escape from us. Blue growled, warning us not to move as the small one stared at us with wide eyes. We could see confusion running in its mind at top speed as we waited for it to shift back to the human form. Not a witch, Blue mumbled in my mind. How are you sure? I asked. Sparkle said. I hummed, thinking the wolf's name was Sparkle, so it was a she. Blue kept long strides towards the pup as it started shivering, while looking at us like we were some threat. Then it ran. Blue growled aloud as he ran after the small pup. She couldn't run for more than 10 meters away from us. We were quicker than her. Blue pushed her body to the ground. She fell with a small yelp. Blue kept one of his paws on the pup's neck, one pressing on her body. Ask her to shift, I growled, and ordered Blue in my mind. I was kind of mad at the fact that she thought she could run away from me. It wasn't like a mere small wolf could beat me. I want you to shift. I heard Blue order the small wolf beneath us. I can't. Our chest started heaving up and down as we heard her denying our desire. I wouldn't say I liked it when someone rejected my orders, and neither did Blue. Blue put more pressure on her neck, and her eyes squeezed shut in pain. Shift, Blue said again, but his voice was laced with more authority and warning the second time. The pup's eyes widened in fear. She looked around for an escape before shifting uncomfortably under the pressure of our large paws. She closed her brown eyes and started shifting back to her human self. I watched as the little wolf shifted under my stare. Her fur skin started turning a pale color, and her beastie-looking nails and face turned to much smoother skin and soft-looking skin. Soon after, a small girl was lying underneath me with wide eyes. Her hair was sticking out everywhere with dirt covering it. Her hands were trying their best to cover herself. That was only when I realized I was staring at her powerful presence body, as if nothing in the world mattered. I snapped out of the trance, and Blue moved away from her. The girl quickly covered herself as if I didn't see it before. However, I sniffed around. Won't be easy to find her clothes without a scent. Blue asked me in a teasing voice. I rolled my eyes in my mind. Don't roll your eyes at me. If it wasn't for me who snapped you out of, Watching her, wow, you'll spend the whole day. Shut up, just look for her clothes. I growled at Blue, who moved afterwards. He sniffed on the earth. It took him a good minute to finally spot some clothes near the same tree I kept my clothes. How didn't I see her clothes before? Using his sharp teeth, Blue grabbed at the clothes and ran back to where we left the girl. The girl was still in the same spot. "Are these your clothes?" Blue asked Sparkle, the wolf of that girl. "What does she say?" I impatiently asked. "It is." Blue tossed her clothes at her while ours lay on the ground. We watched as the girl quickly hugged the clothes, as if they were gold. She looked at us with requesting eyes. Turn around," I mumbled. Blue huffed in annoyance, but turned away from her. A few minutes passed as we turned away from her. "Who do you think she is?" I asked Blue. "I have no idea," he said back. "Ask that Sparkle or someone." I groaned. "Oh, she didn't say anything. Okay, now turn around. What if she hasn't changed back?" I silently groaned. Taking my hint, Blue turned around for us to see nobody on the spot. That was when we noticed a small figure hiding behind the tree while secretly watching us. Blue looked down at our clothes as his paws started turning back to my human limbs. "Shifting back already?" I asked, amazed at how Blue himself was shifting back. His usual behavior was always trying to stay in the wolf form for hours. That was how I decided not to let him have control of our bodies for long. He hummed. It took us only a few seconds to shift back to my human form. I stretched out, feeling the slight pain fade away. I quickly took the clothes from the ground, with my eyes training on the girl hiding behind the tree. Her eyes were on me, looking at me in awe. With a smirk on my lips, I put on my clothes, seeing how her eyes shifted the way I moved to get myself into the clothes. Finally, when I was done wearing the clothes, an unknown smile played on my lips. "Done staring?" I asked her. She gasped and looked down with a flustered face. I frowned as I realized she skipped the question. "Why don't you have a scent?" I tried again, knowing it was good to ask her that. She was strange. Her wolf was odd to the point she didn't even have a scent. But I couldn't figure out if she was a rouge or not because... Was her scent dead? She shrugged. "I asked you a question," I said, raising my voice a bit. She shook her head twice as I clicked my tongue in annoyance. She was indeed checking my patience. One thing I didn't have for anyone. She looked startled, however, she froze for a second. I realized her wolf was talking to her. Taking a deep breath, she raised her hands and pointed at herself. The next minute I watched as she moved her hands here and there, trying to say something. My only question was, why was she using her hands and not her mouth? From what she tried to sign, I felt as if she was trying to say something like she didn't want to talk with me, which made me mad again. "I don't want to talk?" I slowly asked. "Is that what you mean?" My last question came out with a growl. She quickly shook her head and then pointed at her throat while shaking her head. "You can't talk." As in, I started when I realized maybe she was trying to say that she was mute. She quickly beamed at me, showing a thumbs up when I got it right. I almost flinched at how her sullen and wounded face got a sudden stretched smile. She looked so creepy. No offense. I silently cleared my throat, regaining my composition. "Go back to where you came from," I pointed aside and ordered. Using her signing language, showed me the direction I came from and that her home was that way. I nodded, understanding. "Oh, I came from that direction too, I said, motioning her to follow me if she wanted, which she did. We walked the long way in silence. I glanced at the girl who was coming behind me from time to time. She was walking about 10 meters behind me. Throughout the walk, I decided to have a closer look at her, though she was far away. For one, she was short. She had a skinny, pale body, but she had got a fluffy look with her dirty long hair. I couldn't quite see how her face looked because of the dirt on her face. Did she live all her life in the woods or something? I asked Blue in my mind. She needs a bath, Blue joked. It was time we reached the side of the blue crystal pack house. I turned around to see the girl standing there while staring at the building with shaky eyes. Then she released a sigh, not knowing how I was watching her. Alpha Gray, an annoying voice came from inside the pack. Luna emerged from inside with a big fake smile. I faked a smile, trying my best to show her my sincerity. "Did you go for a walk?" she asked me, as if it was the most amazing thing she had ever found out. I nodded, brushing off some mud from my hands. I needed a bath. The woods are slippery and muddy these days. You should be really. She stopped the explanation with her extra cheerful voice as she looked behind me. I watched as her eyes turned dark with fury while she watched the girl who was behind me. The girl froze on her spot. "You." Luna's voice suddenly changed, in which I looked at her in amazement. How did she change her voice that fast? "You ungrateful creature. I know exactly what kind of discipline you need," Luna yelled, her voice trembling with undisguised hatred. "My blood boils the moment I look at your face." A loud slap landed on the girl's face, which sounded painful. She almost fell to the ground, but Luna quickly picked her up and dragged her in by her ears. What was going on? Who was she to be treated like that? Was she maybe someone who betrayed her pack? I watched as the duo disappeared into the same door Lune emerged from before. I shook my head, realizing it wasn't my business, and my stomach growled in hunger. I watched as the new alpha from the woods talked with Luna. I didn't know what relationship they had, but I assumed he was friends with Luna, which made my eye twitch at the thought. I actually thought he was a good person. "He is not as bad as you think," Sparkle said in my mind. "Anyone who talks with Luna like that is pure shit, I am sure. Just forget it. He was even about to strangle me to death. How can I forget that?" I asked Sparkle. "Hey, anyone would do that. I mean, we don't have a cent every, so he didn't know we were part of the pack. I don't care about what he thinks. I just wish we never met." I scraped my feet on the mud underneath my bare legs. For a second, I glanced back at the woods, thinking if it would be good to flee back into the woods before Luna noticed me. But I wasn't even fast enough to do so. "You!" Luna's voice suddenly yelled, looking at me with fierce eyes. My lips parted as I started breathing heavily. Why did she have to come out just as I came? I pathetically looked around for help, knowing how her rough fingers would grab my ears any second and drag me inside. My eyes locked with the alpha from the woods for a mere second. A different and foreign feeling crept inside me. I realized it was embarrassment. He was looking right at me. He was seeing everything right in front of his eyes. And it was so embarrassing how he would witness all the assaults. Without warning, Ren stepped forward and aggressively blocked my path, trapping me in place. I gasped in sheer panic as he used his towering height to intimidate me, demanding my absolute compliance. Later, Luna's cold fury manifested as she forcefully escorted me back into the dark storeroom, her harsh grip on my shoulder making it impossible for me to break free. I didn't have time to contemplate what happened, and it felt as if my cheek got busted as the pain erupted through my face. Next thing, I couldn't entirely stay standing on my legs because of the way she pulled me towards her. I looked away as we went past Alpha Gray. I was ashamed to look at him with what happened. I couldn't help but grow hatred towards the whole world. Thinking back, it was going on as a cycle every day. One day, it would go with so much work that would tire every cell of my body. The next day, it would be a horrible day with physical assault as well as verbal harassment. Though, the most painful memory was what happened the night of my 18th birthday. Luna dragged me into the outside storeroom as she pushed me to the ground harshly. I stayed in the lying position waiting for the pain in my body to leave or cease. How dare you even think of coming back here after hitting the future Alpha? Her voice echoed in the storeroom as I slowly rose to my legs. Can't I come back to the place I live? I thought. But I knew how I couldn't reply to her. Even if I had any voice in me, I wouldn't have the confidence to do so. Do you know who that was? I even lost myself just now, she yelled at me. I cringed at the way how her voice raised an octave for every word. She walked towards me and grabbed my dirty hair, which I silently whimpered. It hurt so much that all I could do was try to remove her grip around my hair with my tiny fingers and look at her in horror. You are utterly useless. How many times I asked Jackson to throw you all out, she said in a somewhat frustrated tone as she pushed me away from her. At least the second time not using so much force. I watched as she went outside, surprisingly leaving the door open. I expected her to lock me inside. I quickly took the opportunity to sneak out of the storeroom as soon as her figure faded away. I sighed in relief, holding both my cheek and ear, wishing my hands would absorb the permanent pain on them. Happy that she left. A familiar voice asked from my side. I silently gasped and turned to see the devil himself. Alpha Wren was the second person I wanted to escape, the first being Alpha Gray. So you met Gray in the woods? He asked, despite knowing how I could not speak. I gave him a slight shrug. He got the answer. Then it was silent. My legs were aching to leave the place, but I knew it would be disrespectful to him. I meekly took a glance at him in the quiet time. Just as I looked at him, I saw him already looking down at me. I quickly looked down at my filthy feet, which were covered in mud and dust at the same time. I didn't fail to notice how his left cheek looked kind of red. I couldn't help but smirk at how my punch left that mark on his cheek. "Tuss, boring," he mumbled, and walked past me in the direction where Luna went. I rolled my eyes as his figure too faded. That guy was indeed jobless to bother me every second. I walked around the pack house to the back door. It was open, and our cook was sitting on the step while going through a book. I walked over and stood there. It took her a few seconds to notice me. "My God, did you go through a hurricane?" she asked in honest concern. Then she sighed and kept the book aside. She was in her late 50s, obviously an Omega, but her elderly age made her live with much respect. She was the one who looked after us, the Omegas, when she was free. Everyone used to call her Nanny for an unknown reason. "Let me clean you," she said. She took me inside across the kitchen. Others who were doing their chores turned in my direction. That was when I remembered the commotion I had made the previous day. Nanny took me downstairs. I poked my head in every direction and tried to get a glimpse of my friend Fa, but she was nowhere to be found. I assumed she was somewhere doing I was looking for you the whole night, shorty. Just like that, her voice came from behind. I turned to her and smiled at her. I know even sometimes I lose my patience, but did you lose your brain to hit Alpha Ren in front of everyone like that? She yelled. Tess, get out and do your work, kid. I am going to give Every a haircut and clean her wounds, Nanny said, trying to shoo her away. You can't. Luna upstairs is looking for you. That is why I came, Fa said. Don't worry, I'll make sure Every is bald and full of wounds at the end, she teasingly promised to the nanny, who left me under Fa's care. Come on. Fa pulled me to the washroom. It was an open space with a few showers and a few stalls of closed toilets on one side, pretty much for everyone to use. I patiently watched as she took the large basin we sometimes used to play bathtub with. She turned on a faucet and let water pour in. Wash yourself under the shower and come. I am going to give you the best haircut ever. You met some girl in the woods and Luna hit her, my beta Kevin asked. I didn't see her the whole day today. Come to think of it, doesn't this pack look like some military base? I didn't hear anyone laugh, even, I glumly said. Maybe they are doing a polite act because of us. Anyways, I think it is better to keep your nose out of this pack's business. But who gave Luna permission to hit someone like that? I exclaimed. I have only seen Ma yell or scold pack members. She never hurt them physically. Things can be a bit different, Alpha. We are here to strengthen the bond between the two packs. Don't try to change anything here. Just watch and leave after the 2 weeks, Kevin explained. Tess, I hate it when you are right, I grumbled. I love it when I am right. I rolled my eyes at him. Kevin leaned on the balcony railing and looked down at the pack members training in the grassy yard. Some were shifted into their wolf forms, and some were fighting with their human forms. Need one? Kevin nudged at my side with his hand holding a cigarette bud. He always carried a pack with him. I sighed and grabbed it from him. He snatched the bud he gave again from my hand, and using a flicker he lit the cigarette. Then he gave it again. I chuckled and retook it. Why are you acting like my babysitter again? I asked. Because I am older than you, remember. Since you were small, you were training under me, he said with a smirk. I rolled my eyes at his point. He was right. He was 5 years older than me, and I trained under him all the years of my training. Training under him was a nightmare. Some days we trained for more than 10 hours. His method was to insult me when I showed any kind of weakness. He very well knew that every alpha disliked getting insulted. It was nothing new that alphas have high egos. I put the long cigarette between my lips and took a slight drag. The toxic smoke went through my mouth, and when I opened my mouth, the smoke came out. I coughed once, then put the bud between my lips again. Kevin was already smoking next to me. We stayed in silence while dragging the smoke and releasing them in sync. It was another buddy thing we used to do ever since I passed my legal age. That doesn't mean I didn't illegally smoke before that. I didn't know you smoke. An unfamiliar voice came from inside. Both Kevin and I turned in the direction where the voice came. We met with a strange face. It is Ren, Kevin mind-linked me. Do you? I asked Ren, extending my hand. He shook hands with me and shook his head. I tried once, but it is not my cup of tea, he said. Are you watching the training? He asked. Yes, it is a good view from here, I said. Kevin patted my back and walked inside, leaving me with the new guy. I cursed him through my mind link, mainly because he left. He just sang a few lyrics of a song. Aren't you training? I asked Ren, as I didn't know what to ask next. Oh, I do. But Father wanted me to meet you. Aren't we going to be friends in the future? He asked. No, thanks. Of course, we are allies after all. How about a friendly fight between us? He asked. Now? Scared? You bet, I challenged back. We walked downstairs. I could say I didn't like the guy, but he was better than his father. He was better looking too. He had short Cheshire hair. It waved when he walked down. He was my height. There was absolutely nothing to dislike about his appearance or attitude, but something about him gave me a not-so-good vibe. Maybe the bloodline. Once, we walked outside to the field behind. I dropped my cigarette by the side and crushed it with my boots. I heard Ren cracking his knuckles as he walked ahead of me. I followed him from behind while observing every pack member. Most of them stopped practicing when we passed to pay respect. As we went past them, they went back to lashing at each other again. Ren took off his shirt and put it under the shade of a tree. Look, he is the one I was talking about. Fa parted the leaves of the bush and let me peek to take a glance at the alpha of the Dark Moon Pack whom everyone was talking about. According to Fa, the guests came the night before when I was in the woods. So I squinted my eyes and tried to see the so-called handsome, reeking dominancy alpha. But except I silently gasped when I saw the alpha from last night. He was taking off his shirt and next to him was Alpha Ren. I scowled at that person and trained my eyes on Alpha Grey for a change. He had a smirk on his face as he said something to Alpha Ren. So he was friends with Alpha Ren as well. Did you see? Fa asked. Tell her I only saw the alpha I met in the woods, I told Sparkle. Because Every is mute, she can't talk with pack members through the mind link. But her wolf, Sparkle, can communicate with other wolves. Sparkle might have used the link with Fa's wolf to tell her because Fa gasped. Oh my God, so you already met him? I tilted my head in question. He is our visitor, the alpha of the Dark Moon Pack, she exclaimed. Whoa, no wonder. With those muscles and that, I am still very innocent. I wish you could keep those thoughts to yourself. Sparkle scoffed in my mind. I didn't say anything, Jew, just surprised, I said. Can you ask Fa what they are doing, if she has any idea? Fa smiled at me. I think they are going for a friendly fight, girl, she said. We heard a few voices coming close and we ducked right in time. Some betas passed the bush where we hid. Fa and I both released a sigh as they went. It was our working hour, but we ditched our work for a chance to spy on the guests, honestly, because we weren't allowed to even go near them. We watched as Alpha Ren and Grey shifted into their wolf forms. I gulped when I remembered how he chased after me and trapped me under him. The way his green eyes stared down at me, his sharp teeth when he growled. I shook my head to shake off those thoughts. I like blue, Sparkle confirmed in my mind. Too bad then, we should wait for our mate. Alpha Grey's wolf was entirely black, his eyes green, and those glowed when his scent got tight and dominant. Alpha Ren's wolf had a dark brown coat, but here and there his fur was black. He had dark brown eyes. His wolf was as big as Alpha Grey's. I saw how everyone in the training ground stopped to watch the two alphas going for a friendly fight. The soft growls coming from both the alphas made the air still and heavy. Skull, Alpha Ren's wolf, pounced and jumped at Blue, Alpha Grey's wolf, but Blue was quick enough to dodge it. Just when Skull growled and turned to Blue, Blue tackled him to the ground. The two wolves rolled on the ground, but Blue lost his balance when Skull clawed at him. It was another regular fight. But after a few minutes, I realized there seemed to be no end. Both the alphas were strong, so it went on and on, longer than regular fights. Maybe, just maybe, the fight won't be as friendly as we all assumed. Skull growled aloud and once again tackled Blue by biting his neck. Blue turned his neck and bit back, which made both of them back away. They walked in a few circles, growling and watching their opponent. That was when Skull jumped forward and clawed Blue across his face. It was a relatively common rule not to hurt each other during friendly matches. In friendly matches, if the opponent keeps their claw directly at a vein or a deadly spot, or tackles the other to the ground and trap, or maybe when both of them run out of stamina, the battle ends. Everyone gasped when they saw how the claw mark stamped on Blue's face. Because he was an alpha with such dominancy, it started healing within seconds. But when he ferociously growled, he made it well clear he would stamp more than one claw mark on Skull. Blue jumped in the air and threw Skull to the ground. Blue swiped at Skull, cutting his ear, but I couldn't see the details from the distance we were. Skull howled and tried to push Blue off his body, but Blue snarled and bit Skull's front paw, making a sickening, crunching sound. I silently winced and covered my ears. Let's get out of here before things get dirtier. Fa quickly pulled me out, and we ran back to the pack house. I turned around while running to see some pack members coming for aid. No, Sparkle. Every single alpha is the same. They are cunning, aggressive, and would always have empty promises up their sleeves, I said in my mind. Ren's actions will bring nothing but disaster, Fa said with a sigh. We were walking through the grass yard while collecting large rocks and leaves. I nodded in reply, and she continued talking. Dark Moon Pack is the strongest pack. They may even have connections that we don't. He shouldn't have done what he did. Why do you think the friendly fight became unfriendly? She asked. I shrugged. I am pretty sure Ren and Gray won't be allies after Alpha Jackson. We had to cut our conversation short when we heard the bell of curfew ring, indicating that we had to go inside and lock the doors. It was a rule our pack practiced, not because the night was dangerous, but for an emergency. They said it would be a good practice. We went inside. Our day wasn't busy because other Omegas were assigned in the kitchen. When we went inside the kitchen, I saw a totally hectic crowd in there. Alpha Jackson sure was trying to impress Alpha Gray's pack. No wonder they wanted power. Do you need our help? Fa asked the nanny. No, dear, please clean around the basement, she said. So we walked downstairs to clean the basement. It was around midnight when we finished our work and went to sleep. I slipped under my blankets and tried to sleep, but something kept on bothering me. Was it that I became highlighted under everyone's eyes after hitting Alpha Ren? Or was it because it was an embarrassing and tireful day? One way or another, I felt so tired. About everything. Every day seemed to be the same. There wasn't the thing called equality in our pack. There was nothing to look forward to. While the Omegas worked their ass off the whole day, I've seen some partying in their rooms, having movie days and things. According to Alpha, our duty was to clean, cook, and keep everything in order. Betas and Alphas shouldn't do them because they have to train and strengthen the pack's power. But that was so unfair, having small and weak bodies, and we even had to do most of the work. Just maybe someone could rescue us from here. Finally, I fell asleep, but I woke up pretty soon. The second I woke up, I looked out of the window to find the crescent moon still shining, indicating that it was still early dawn. I sighed and removed the tangled blanket around me. Then I walked out of the room silently. I walked along the basement corridor while stretching my limbs. Then I peeked into the nanny's room to check the time. Her room was the only room that had a clock in the basement. It said 5 a.m., 1 more hour till we had to wake up. But I didn't feel sleepy. My body ached so much that sleep didn't like to embrace me. So I tiptoed upstairs while shivering under the chilly wind. It had started snowing outside. There were tiny snowdrops falling, and it might begin to snow sooner or later heavily. I grabbed my shoes from the cupboard and slipped my legs into them. Then I tied the laces and neatened my weirdly cut hair. I slowly opened the kitchen door and stepped outside. My hands immediately started shaking, and my teeth began chattering due to the cold. I was never the person who could suppress coldness. Even the tiny drop in temperature made me shiver. Nanny used to say that it was because I was too skinny. I closed the door behind me and walked along the path to the field behind. My feet gently thudded against the hard earth, which was covered in silk snow. I slipped my hands into the t-shirt I was wearing. But it didn't help me with the coldness. I wanted to go back and cover myself under the blanket, but I decided to walk on. I walked into the woods. By the time I arrived, my whole body was covered in a thin line of snow. I shook myself off. The snow sprinkled on the ground. God, why are we here? Sparkle, who woke up just then, yawned and asked. I couldn't sleep, so I came, I replied. It is freezing Are you sure you won't catch a cold? She asked in concern. I don't know. I am not sure. I just wanted some time away from the pack house, I said. And you know that I can hear your thoughts, right? You are not happy in this pack, are you? I was never happy, but we both know that we don't have the strength to run off. Yeah. I mumbled in my mind while thinking what it would be like to run away from the pack. Obviously more disaster. I was the queen of disaster. Most probably, we would get caught under the eyes of a rouge who might or might not kill me. If I am lucky, I will be able to find another pack. Hopefully, they won't kill me the second they spot me. One way or another, it won't work, because I was so unlucky. Forget it. I sniffed and covered my nose using one hand. I was sure my nose looked red by now. Then, my ears started hurting from the cold, so I used both my hands to cover them. We should go before you freeze to death, Sparkle said. But before I could reply, we both heard footsteps. Who is that? I asked Sparkle without daring to turn around. A werewolf. Not our pack, Sparkle said. I quickly turned around in the direction of the footsteps. I went behind a bush and hid behind. I watched as the alpha from last time, Alpha Gray, silently walked down the path. Oh, him, Sparkle mumbled. We'd better leave. Why? He is a visitor, remember? Alpha Jackson specifically told us, the Omegas, not to go in front of them, I explained. And you two met before, remember? It is the same. She was right. I slowly stood up from the place I was, but I decided not to talk with him or go toward him. Instead, I started walking in the direction where he came from, where the pack house was. Are you avoiding me? He asked. I froze. I didn't reply, of course. I couldn't answer, so instead, I hid behind a large tree that was blocking my way. Didn't see you again in the pack house either, Alpha Gray said, starting a conversation. Then he turned to me and raised his eyebrows as a question. So, I nodded. Last night, he sighed, your alpha had a feast to the whole pack. Isn't it rude not to come? I clenched my hands into fists at his words. If only he knew what was happening inside. Because I didn't want to show him the real side of the pack, I nodded. I watched as he silently walked further while kicking at every stone that blocked his way. Didn't you come for a walk like me? Come on, he said. I cautiously followed him from behind, leaving a reasonable distance between us. The further we walked, the thicker the woods got. The thicker the woods got, the scarier it turned out to be. So I stopped in my tracks. I looked around to see a prominent rock next to me, so I walked over there and sat. I've never walked alone that far because it scared me. I only followed because there was someone as well. Alpha Grey walked further, and I lost his figure. I shuddered at the coldness and slid my hands into my t-shirt. My fingers gazed at my upper stomach seeking warmth. I blew out some air as I impatiently waited for the alpha. I waited and waited till he returned. The thin layer of clothes didn't help me either. You should have worn at least a jacket. I gasped when Alpha Grey's figure popped out from the opposite direction. He disappeared too. I nodded and watched as he removed his leather jacket. Then he tossed it over to me, but I jumped before it touched me. It landed on the ground. Though I couldn't scent his pheromones, I was sure his jacket would be reeking of it. If it touches me or if I wear it, Alpha Grey's pheromones might cover me, and that was like seeking death. I saw Alpha Grey glaring at me as his jacket lay on the ground. I quickly moved my hands and tried to say that I could not wear it and why, but it didn't work. So first I threw his jacket at him, then I took a small stick from the ground and started writing on the wet ground, which was covered in a thin layer of snow. I wrote, "Your pheromones are in the jacket. I can't wear it. Or do you want to freeze to death?" he asked. I wrote, "That is better. Seriously, you are one weird person," he mumbled. Then he picked his jacket from the ground and shook its dirt off before wearing it. "Now, because you have a way to communicate, what is your name?" I hesitated for a while. I shouldn't be talking to him, but because it was only my name, he asked. I slowly jutted it on the ground. "Everlay?" he asked. I nodded as a reply. "You already know my name." I nodded again. "You are an Omega. How come you don't have a scent?" He was asking too many questions. I shrugged because, honestly, I didn't know why I didn't have a scent. He hummed and sat on the rock where I sat before. Keeping my distance, I sat on the dirty ground far from him. "You were born in the pack?" he asked. I nodded because I didn't want to explain what happened. "How come I didn't see you in the pack house, even once?" He was at it again. I looked away, annoyed at his question. Though we were taught not to show an attitude towards alphas, I couldn't hold it inside. I am annoying, am I not? Since I came to this pack the day before, it didn't feel right. I mean, this pack isn't lively. I didn't move or anything but listened. "Back in my pack, I have a little sister. She is an Omega," he said. That got my full attention. Don't tell me he threw the little girl out. I cursed in my mind to Sparkle. "He did. You remind me of her," he completed. I wrote on the ground in haste. "How? She also has weirdly cut hair like you, and she is mute as well," he said. I looked at him in amusement. I messily wrote a reply. "I have never met another mute person. You would love to meet her. That is how I know sign language." "Do you know?" he asked. I shook my head sullenly. "Look at me." I looked at him. He moved his hands in weird patterns in front of me and waited for my reaction. I tilted my head in confusion. I said that my name was Gray. Sign language is pretty easy. Most mute people share it with the person they are mostly close with for communication. Why don't you learn? He asked. Who will teach me? I wrote on the ground. I can. Aren't you leaving soon? I wrote. Yeah, 1 week and a few days left. Why did you come? Oh, we are going to strengthen the two packs' friendship. Surprising how you didn't know, he said. Is there even real friendship? I wrote and quickly erased it with the back of my palm. But when I looked at Alpha Gray, I realized he saw it. So I pursed my lips in anxiety. Luckily, he didn't say anything against it. Why do you say so? He asked. I hesitated to write anything, so I just swirled the stick on the dirt. Say it. I won't say anything. I eyed Alpha Gray. Dumbly trusting him, I slowly wrote, They are evil. I only said that. I was in the blue crystal pack anyways, and it wasn't polite to say bad things about the place I lived. Though I had so many things to speak against my pack, I stopped from there. Then I wrote a few more words. I have to go back. Why do you appear and hide like this? He asked. But I quickly ran from there. I knew he would come after me if he wanted to, and there was no way I could run faster. But when he didn't, I started strolling. We should avoid going for walks, I told Sparkle. But I love walks. We can come at night or evening, right? Of course we can. It is strange already that I am talking this easily with an alpha. I shouldn't, and I'll be dead meat if Alpha and Luna get to know. No, even a pack member. And I regretted it. It was the late night the next day. I was going out into the woods again. I had a thick scarf draped around my neck as well as borrowed mittens. I was ready to beat the coldness and walk alone in the woods, talking with my wolf while enjoying the surroundings. I had already decided not to shift to my wolf form because I would die of coldness when I turned powerful presence after reshifting. However, everything was fine until I saw none other than the person I was planning to avoid. Alpha Gray. Shit, weren't we going to avoid him? Sparkle asked. Tesk, timing is a troublemaker. He is a stalker. It is a coincidence. And like that, my wolf and I were arguing through our link. Alpha Gray spotted me when I clumsily stepped on a pile of dry leaves. His eyes shifted from the ground to mine, and we stared for a second. I quickly raised my hand and waved at him to flee from the awkward situation. He quickly walked up to me. How'd you know I am here? He asked. I quickly shook my head to tell him it was a misunderstanding. I slowly took a step back to have the 1 meter distance between. Alpha Gray creased his forehead as he looked around. He looked at the tree which was next to us and broke a small stick from it. I knew the drill and took it from his hand. I wrote what I wanted to say on the ground. Coincidence. Oh, by the way, I wanted to know something and I couldn't come out in the morning. Lucky this happened. He said this and that. I tilted my head, motioning for him to ask what he wanted to. Did I misunderstand or what? Or are you the only Omega in this pack house? He asked. I was left speechless. Of course, I was always speechless, but I was left with no way to react, so I shrugged. So it is true? He slowly asked. It is true that Omegas are separated. It is the same reason why I don't see you there, he said. I didn't reply to what he asked. It wasn't my place to tell him about the pack's situation to him. He should have asked Alpha Jackson for a change. There was no way I was going to tell him the truth. I sighed and knelt on the dirt. Then I started craving some letters. Yes, it is no big deal, I wrote. Let's walk together, he said, ignoring the words I wrote on the ground. Obediently, I started following him as usual. We walked a bit in silence until he spoke. Have you ever had rouge attacks here? He asked before turning to me for a silent reply. I nodded, remembering how a set of wolves attacked us around 5 or 6 years back. Alphas and betas fought against them, and I could remember watching them from a room upstairs. That was the only time I felt respect towards my pack member, especially alphas. They saved everyone. Around 3 weeks before I came here, we got a massive attack. It was the second we got. Around 50 attacked from the woods. And guess what? One of the pack members to whom I gave shelter was their messenger, he said. Was he the dumb not to notice a rat in his pack? I wasn't dumb, he growled as if he read my mind. I had the rule to take in whoever abandoned rouge outside after a background check. At first, I didn't see the danger, but now I have strengthened the security and changed those rules. I nodded, understanding. He seems like a good alpha, Spark commented. Meh, I don't see anything special. Okay then, why don't we go inside and have a chit-chat with another alpha? Spark nagged, trying to prove herself right. And yes, unfortunately, she was right. I've never had an alpha, moreover a beta trying to have a conversation with me. Alpha Grey and I walked a bit deeper into the forest. We were not going in the usual route, and the new path looked nice. It had so many rocks and stones, though. I had a hard time walking. Sparkle requested to shift to our wolf form, which I rejected because there was no way I was going to be powerful presence in front of the same alpha again. Wait, that came out wrong. I heard a thud, and I looked at my front to see the alpha chillingly sitting on a log. He raised his eyebrows and waited for me to do whatever I wanted next. So, being the polite one, I too sat on a rock which was in front of him. What is your name? He said. My eyes shifted to him. Was he dumb or dumb? I could clearly remember telling him my name. This is how it is done, he added while motioning his hands in front of his face. I watched what he did with an open mouth. He pointed at himself, then around his ear and lips, and it was complicated. He is trying to teach you sign language, Sparkle cheered. Shush. There is no way I can memorize these hand things. I groaned, but still tried to watch as he repeated what he did. Do it with me, he said. Together we moved our hands in front of us, and the situation was kind of awkward. If someone walked by, they would think we landed on another planet. Sign language looked interesting, though. Wrong, he said, repeating one part. I pouted and showed him if I was right. It still says a wrong word. Let's start simple. I can teach you yes and number, they are basics, he said. I quickly nodded. Small words like those would come in handy. I said to my wolf, who was silent. I mentally rolled my eyes, thinking she fell asleep while I had to learn sign language all alone. For the next few minutes, Alpha Grey showed me this and that with his hands. I tried my best to do them right. Most of the time, I've got the wrong words. The thing was, I realized if I accidentally did something slightly different from what he told me, it became another new word. So it wasn't easy to get it right. In the end, we both were laughing, him laughing aloud, and my silent laughing. And I could say that it was a good laugh. It had been so long since I did so. I knew the sign language thing wouldn't work for me. But when I went back to the pack house and showed for the words yes, no, and maybe she too said that she would teach me, she was pleased with the bit of progress. But her next question made me stop. "From where did you learn?" she asked. Luckily, we got called to do the dishes in the kitchen. Even though she was my friend and I trusted her with my whole heart, I felt scared to tell her about the constant meetings that kept on happening. And they should not happen again, though he made me feel comfortable to be around. Yes, I swore to myself that I wouldn't see Alpha Grey anymore, but things didn't go the way I planned the next day. Fa and I were appointed to clean some of our pack members' rooms when Luna barged inside. "Listen, girls," she said in her usual authoritative voice. "There are 7 guest rooms we've reserved for the visitors and the tea room. I want you two to have them cleaned by tonight. They will stay for more days, so they should be clean." That was the first thing we heard early in the morning. Nothing could be worse. Luna gave me the stink eye and left the room, ordering some others to do this and that. "Total, there are 8 rooms, right?" Fa asked me as soon as she left. I nodded. "How about we split and go? 4 each? You can choose whatever you like," she said. I smiled at her words. Though sometimes she treated me like a baby, it came in handy. She was older than me by around 5 years. So she never wanted me to do hard work, though I insisted that I could do it because I was old. "I will take the tea room and 3 more rooms," she said before I could decide. I gave her a judging look because it was evident that the tea room was large and complex to clean with all the ornaments. "This doesn't come to you free, miss. It would help if you made me a cup of coffee after doing your part," she said, batting her eyelashes. Knowing the decision was already taken, I nodded and shooed her out of the pack member's room. Then I collected the cleaning items and put them in the rolling cart. I glanced at the neat room and walked out of the room, closing the door behind me. Then I quickly pitter-pattered after Fa to catch up with her. She pointed at the first room on the 3rd floor and walked towards the tea room with a duster, washcloths, and a basket. I opened the first room and peeked inside. Whoa, it looked like a total mess. Who the hell lived like a monkey? I huffed in annoyance, not being able to decide how to start and from where to start. "I swear this person's mate is the unluckiest," I groaned in my mind. "I hope it is your mate," came Sparkle's reply. "Very funny. Then it is going to be your mate as well, genius. Don't try to be funny." "Fine, miss. Whatever you say. Now chop chop, start working before the guests arrive." She was right. So I first decided to collect the clothes and things on the floor as well as all over the bed. I mean, how did this person even sleep with a mattress like that? Sigh. Anyway, I took the clothes around and put them in a separate laundry bag, then wrote on the bag, "Number 1. Then I tidied the bed and put new sheets on them. I thought it was going to be easy, but honestly there was a lot to do. It took me nearly 1 hour to clean the first room, and then I trotted to the second to find it even worse than the first. I copied what I did with the first room and cleaned it starting from the laundry. I was only halfway through cleaning it when someone opened the door and came inside. I froze. There was a guy at the door looking at me as if I was a stalker looking around his room. So I quickly pointed at the small trolley with cleaning objects. He looked at it with a questioned look and then nodded. But he didn't leave the room, so I had to clean the rest under his watchful eyes. "Why are you cleaning this room anyways?" he suddenly asked. I quickly showed him that I couldn't speak. He nodded in understanding. "I am Kevin, by the way, the beta of the Dark Moon Pack." He introduced himself to me with a frown. I slowly shook hands with him and withdrew. "Do you go in the woods by any chance?" he asked. I nodded, but I was confused. Okay, you can leave if you are done here. So I quickly collected the cleaning equipment and left the room. I sighed in relief when I was outside. So the training and thingies are over? I asked Sparkle. Most probably. I wish the other room is a girl's. I opened the third room and poked my head inside. There was no one there, so I laughed to myself and went in. The room was clean. I don't think there is anything to clean here, I told. Yes, let's leave. Nope, their laundry. I pointed at a pile of used clothes and walked over. I was thankful to whoever was in the room for keeping the room clean. I took a new laundry bag and started putting the clothes inside. Most of them were turned backwards, so I had to turn them to the right side. I was filling the laundry bag with clothes when I heard the water running inside the washroom. There was a washroom attached to the side of the room, and the door remained closed. Oh God, there is someone inside. After a few seconds, the sound stopped. I quickly stuffed the clothes into the bag, trying to flee from the room, but stopped when I realized I had to put clean sheets on the bed. I groaned and pulled the used bed sheet. Then I quickly pulled the pillowcases, but I wasn't fast enough. I was about to put the new sheet on the bed when someone came out of the washroom, and stupid me, I crouched down in fear. I didn't want that person to think that I was an intruder. It was silent at first, so I patiently waited for that person to leave the room or something, and then I realized I'd left the cleaning trolley in the middle of the room. What a brain knife. I heard soft footsteps and the ruffling of clothes, and silence again. I can't remember this being here. I heard a familiar voice mutter. It was Alpha Gray. What the actual duck? And he was talking about the trolley. Thinking it was better to face the situation, I quickly rose from the crouching position. The door opened, and I froze as Alpha Gray stepped into the room, surrounded by a light mist from the steam. His raw, powerful presence was striking, and for a moment, the entire room fell into a breathless silence.